Today what we're going to talk about is borders, all things borders. And then I'm going to show you our quick and easy method for how to do mitered borders. So how many of you guys are worried about miters or don't like doing them? I'm going to show you a really slick way to do those. I am from the Whimsical Workshop. I appreciate you guys popping by to see us today. And we are a design studio here in Phoenix, Arizona. We are on YouTube, Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram. You can find all of those links at our website, which is thewhimsicalworkshop.com. Behind me is our current sew-along that's going on. It's free through our Facebook group, Heidi's Quilting Help Desk. You just join the group. You can follow along every Wednesday. So, without further ado, let's get on to borders. I'm going to pan the camera down so you can see what I'm doing, and I'm going to start with straight borders. And actually, before I pan you down, I want to talk about the math for borders. If you ever need to try to figure out how much fabric you need for a border, we use a formula here in the studio, and we design hundreds of patterns a year, so it's a tried and true formula. When we're trying to figure our yardage, we look at the side that we're going to sew the piece onto. If it is less than 42 inches, you only need one width of fabric strip because fabric is 42.5 to 44.5 inch long. If you have a project that is 42.5 to 60 inches long, figure you need 1.5 strips. So instead of trying to figure out the actual inches, we round it up to make it easy. And then if you have a project that is 60 inches to 84 inches, you would need 2 strips per side. So if you had a quilt that was 84 inches square, you need 8 border strips, 2 for each side. That's a quick and dirty method on how we figure yardage here when we have to deal with borders. When you do mitered borders, you always want to take your finished side and size and add 4 inches extra to help you with the miters. If it's an extra wide border, like a 9-inch border, I would add 9 inches. So you want to add extra because you're going to be creating this point, and that is on the finished size, which we'll talk about when we get to miters. So all right, let's pan you down and we're going to talk about borders. First thing we're going to talk about is straight borders. I just gave you the math for it. All of our patterns, we will usually tell you to sew your border pieces, if you have multiple strips, end to end on the diagonal. And a beginner doesn't always know what that is, so this is kind of a refresher if you've already know it, but if you're a beginner and you don't understand that, this is what we mean. You have your 2 strips, you would put them at a right angle, and you would sew the diagonal from the top left corner to the lower right corner so that it flips out. This is the same way we piece binding strips. But that is what we talk about when we say sew on the diagonal. The reason we do this is because it's easier for the eye to skip over the pattern on a diagonal seam, so it's not as noticeable in the quilt as a straight seam. So here is the seam on the diagonal, and here is the seam with a straight. And this is going to be much more natural to see. So that is sewing on the diagonal, quick course. The only time we sew things on a straight is if we have a linear pattern. So here you can see this one is sewn on the diagonal, and it's pretty obvious that there's a break in the pattern, where this one is sewn on the straight and you can't see it. It just sort of goes away. So we use diagonal for general prints, and we use straight for vertical stripes or vertical designs like this. So when we do our borders, we pin them on. You want to pin your borders on, and I'm going to show you a quick and dirty way that we do borders here in the studio. I know the rule of thumb is to measure the center of your quilt, measure each end of your quilt, and then cut your strips to the average width. We usually are doing quilts very, very quickly, and how we do it is we fold the quilt in half. This is a very little quilt for you. We lay our strip on the whole thing, fold this back, and we cut it. We don't get the tape measure out. We don't have to measure. Trust me, this works all the time for us. And then we go ahead and we pin our borders on, and how we pin borders on very quickly is pin one end, pin the second end, pin the center, and then we pin here and here. And that will keep the borders even and will keep you from having a ripply border. If you have a ripply border, a lot of times it's because you haven't pinned it, and the feed dogs will pull the bottom faster than the top, and it can bring in some excess fabric, causing your border to ripple. So let's get to the good part here. We're going to talk about mitered borders. So for mitered borders, and what I mean by a mitered border is that it looks like this. I'll just fold that behind. It is coming out from the point at a 45-degree angle. A lot of quilts, if you're using a stripe panel or a stripe for your border, or if you have multiple strips, you can do a miter border. You can do a miter border just to do a miter border, but a lot of people are intimidated by them and they struggle with them. So I'm going to show you our quick and easy way to do it. First, you take your strips and you pin it onto your quilt top. Now I've already sewn 3 sides on, but I left the last one for you. So how you do this is, instead of going end to end, you fold your border in half, you find the center of your quilt top. Usually there's a block or something that will let us know. You fold it, you align the 2 centers, and you're going to have excess hanging off each side. You want that. And then you would go ahead and you would pin this in place. Then when you go over to your sewing machine to sew this border on, you sew with the border on the bottom and the quilt top on the top. And you start, mark it here so you can see it, you start a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Now I have a Bernina, and on my foot there's actually a line 1/4 inch back from the needle that I can use. Otherwise, just take a ruler and mark this. You're going to start a 1/4 inch away when you sew this side on, and then when you start the top on, you're going into that same spot a 1/4 inch away. That's to give you room to actually miter the corner. So you start a 1/4 inch away, you come down here, and you stop a 1/4 inch away. And that's how you get your border on. So that's this border right here. You get this out of the way. So here it is sewn on, a 1/4 inch from each side. You do not press the border at this point. Don't press anything until all 4 corners are done. So now we're ready to do this corner here. And to do your first corner, you take your quilt and you fold it to align adjacent sides, meaning the side of the quilt comes up to meet the top of the quilt. And what that does is it gives you your borders just sticking out. So there's the 1/4 inch where we stopped. Now you can align your 2 borders. This case I have a sewn border I'm trying to match up. If you have a design to match up, you can align it and pin it. And I usually will pin, here's where the 1/4 inch is, so you can see it. I usually will pin back here just to hold things in place. And I will pin here. And then I'll pin down here. I just want to anchor everything, keep it together, but I want to stay out of my way of my 45-degree angle. Now here's how we mark it. We take a ruler with a 45-degree line on it. So this ruler has, let's get the black one so you can see it. There's the 45-degree line on my ruler. I take the 45-degree line and I align it with the bottom of my border. And I take the edge of the ruler and I align it where I stopped sewing. Okay? And then I draw a line from that point all the way out to the edge of my border. And I go over to the sewing machine and I start here and I sew all the way out to the end. And then I have a mitered corner, which I have sewn for you to see right here. So I'll show you it folded again so you can see what it looks like. So there is what we folded, what we marked. These are the excess. And then I went over and I sewed on that line. And then when we open up our quilt, there is our perfect miter every time. This excess fabric, you can just go ahead and cut the excess. You can use a ruler if you want to be perfect 1/4 inch. If you don't, just take a pair of scissors, you cut that away. Then when all 4 corners are mitered, you go ahead and you press that out. So that's how we do a quick miter border. I want to show you one other thing that I didn't when I went to pin the border on. When you go to pin your borders on, you have these flappy things in your way. And so if you fold them back like this and like this, and then you flip that down and drop a pin in, same thing on this side. Now they're out of your way when you go to align this strip in place. So that's just another tip on how to keep these out of your seam when you're sewing it, because if you have enough stuff flapping around, you can get things caught. So that is our quick and dirty miter. I want to shout out a thank you to Northcott for the fabric that we used for the demo for the miter, and the other fabrics came from Blank Quilting. So thank you to both of you for giving us some fabric. And again, just a quick reminder, we are doing a stitch along, a sew along for the next, we're in week 4 of a 10-week sew along. This is our Dutch Wonderland. You can either make the entire quilt where the pattern is available on our website, or you can just sew along and make 12-inch blocks to make a sampler quilt at the end. So, and all that information is on our blog and on our Facebook group, Heidi's Quilting Help Desks. And if you have questions with miters, again, this is going to go up on our YouTube, so you'll be able to just go look for the mitered border video. They're not as scary as they seem. Once you do a couple of them, you'll get the hang of it, but this method, very easy. So you don't have to worry about getting the pleat in your corner. And I appreciate you following along, and thank you for supporting all of us designers. We appreciate it, and thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, make sure you like and subscribe below. You can find the Whimsical Workshop on our website, thewhimsicalworkshop.com, and that has all links to all of our other social media platforms. Thanks for joining us.